Hello everyone and welcome to a new video from Your Overwatch. I'm Andy the Chump and today we're going to be having some fun and looking back at some of the different metas the game has had since its release and figuring out which one was the best. And by we I mean me, and by best I mean which ones I enjoyed the most because I'm selfish like that. This is not going to be a video where I dryly analyse what objectively was the fairest or most skillful, like a chemistry teacher with an overhead projector. This is about what metas stick out in my mind as fun, that created the kinds of gameplay memories that every gamer cherishes. The joy of this kind of thing is that depending on what heroes you like to play, the answer to this question will be very, very different. So one thing that I really want to see in the comments is your guys' favourites, as they're likely to all be a little bit varied from each other. Now I'm going to be talking about 3 good metas and 1 bad one, as otherwise we'd be here until Season 13 started. Rest assured, I'll do my best to throw shade at metas that really deserve it, but we are going to pick one overall stinker to be consigned to the trash heap of destiny. So without any more preamble, let's get right into it. McCree OP. If you cast your mind back a long way, like right to the game's release, there was a meta that made me fall in love with Overwatch for the very first time. In this magical era, one hero stood out amongst all his peers, his cowboy hat and poncho silhouette against the setting sun striking terror into squishies and tanks alike. I am of course talking about the McCree meta. Back then, Fan the Hammer was completely overpowered and broken, to the point where a fan-roll-fan combo could kill almost anything in the game. It was glorious. It wasn't the least bit fair, but as someone who had come from Counter-Strike and who had always been better with pistols than anything else, this was my dream introduction to the game. Nowadays, McCree needs a lot of babysitting and help to be useful, and still even with that direct pocket support, only the higher skill players can really justify picking him, and only on the right maps. Let me just tell you, as if you didn't already know, that doesn't include your boy Eddie. I genuinely miss the days of right-clicking everything into oblivion and fooling myself into thinking I was actually good. Now don't get me wrong, that meta deserves to be in the past. It needed to go, the game is much better for it. But there is a part of me that took great pleasure in one-button tank busting, especially Roadhog. I don't know why, I just loved fighting that hero. You have to remember, back then Hook was in its 1.0 hooker target through all time and space era as well. I even, without irony, and this is a little bit shameful, looked down on that ability as being too strong, despite using arguably one of the most broken DPS ever. I think part of why I loved this era so much was, the game was so new and in a practical way, a little bit more straightforward. The chaos of mobility hadn't yet become dominant, partially thanks to the overpowered cowboy and that Roadhog Hook 1.0. D.Va and Winston hadn't had some of their most important changes yet that made them really good. Defense Matrix wasn't on a resource at the time, for example. So Rhine was de facto the best tank, and slow deathball play was where it was at, and at the centre of all of that was my first and probably most enduring favourite hero to play. I wish I knew how to quit you, Jesse. Dive everything. Right. I know for some of you this will be a little bit controversial, and I did consider other metas for this spot, but there are many reasons why Dive won out, and I'll go into those here. But before we do that, we have to ask the question, which Dive meta are we talking about, as there were actually subtle differences between them. So early in the game's life, Roadhog's as mentioned insane hook stopped a lot of mobility damage. You might think Brigitte deletes Tracer from the game now, but back then Roadhog did a lot of that job, as well as suppressing dive tanks. But as we all know, Hog went through many revisions, which included various line of sight checks for his hook, which meant it stopped hooking people around corners and through that time and space. After that, dive tanks also got some buffs. D.Va got the defense matrix on a resource, which was good, but then it got changed more so to where it could pass through teammates, and that's the real key. Once that happened, D.Va could effectively give anything 4 seconds of infinite health. You no longer needed to be in front of a squishy to save it, now you could just use the cone of nope to deny that incoming damage. Really good players could also manage that resource to block infinite damage almost continuously. The amount of matrix D.Va has now is much less than the 4 seconds she got up first, and this made the D.Va-Winston duo the best tank lineup in the game. Turns out Winston is very scary if he's in your face zapping you and you can't hurt him. D.Va was also the only tank who could do anything practical about Tracer's emergent damage at that point, while despite being very synergistic with her at the same time. Soon showed everyone how Tracer could farm static tanks like Rhine when not kept in check. That counter and synergy dynamic with D.Va is actually how mirror metas happen. Because of all of these changes, almost any hero that didn't have mobility in its kit really suffered. For me, it was particularly brutal time initially. I was still playing McCree and getting pretty much farmed. This is when I first made the swap to Zen, as Liam's Tracer was getting really good, like GM top 500 level good. Only when I made that swap did I really start to enjoy myself again. Zen Lucio, Tracer Genji and Winston D.Va was an incredibly fun comp to run, and I found a new love in the Omnic Monk. Discord, regen shield health, a great defensive ult and carry potential and orb damage made him feel utterly fantastic to play. It was also a truly skillful meta, especially in the DPS slot. Tracer and Genji have some of the highest skill ceilings in the game, and perhaps Dive's main problem was that for a time at least, there was no real answer to it other than mirroring it if a team was really good at playing it, which meant that the game came down to who can run this skill comp better. Now the reason I said it might be controversial for some of you is because A, it was one of the least variable metas ever in terms of what heroes were actually viable, and B, it lasted for a very long time, going through several iterations over the course of months. I can personally remember being sick to death with how much Matrix D.Va had and how it could feel like, particularly for DPS players, there were just times when you weren't even allowed to get impact or play the video game at all. Like a third of a match, your shots just wouldn't count. Ana also sadly got virtually deleted from the game at this point because Winston Bubbles and Defense Matrix could just stop her from being able to do anything. Mercy too was not at her strongest, which I know bothered a lot of people, more on that later. But, and the reason I did pick it here is because it's just facts to say Dive was very competitive in the hardcore sense of the word. If you were better, you largely won, and if you lost, you just weren't as good. Skill carried, whether that be from the tank, DPS or support slot, and that's why I liked it. I got more Zen fragging players of the game in this era than any other. Right now, the final good meta in my list is the one we currently find ourselves in, which I'm enjoying a great deal. Now I recognise that it's not without its problems, but there's one essential factor that makes it, to me at least, one of the best metas ever. Pretty much everything can be played in its right context. Dive, sure, on the right map. Deathball, you betcha. King's Row is great for that. Bunker defense comps, pirate ship, double sniper, triple DPS, they all have their place and nothing is really too dominant in the way that old metas used to function. Take Dive. At the time, it had no answer. Now, nothing is really playable everywhere, and that's a great place to be in. A great byproduct of that is that actual counterpicking happens much more often. Many more types of heroes get picked because they solve a particular problem. Take Mei as an example. Mei has been pretty off meta for the longest time, but currently, after a few small tweaks, she's much more usable to punish teams playing a comp that doesn't suit a particular map. If a team picks Rein Zarya on Hanamura A and slowly walks into you, Mei can clean up by separating teams using her walls just like she always could. Or say Dorado first point defense, if your opponents just casually walk into that choke over and over, Mei will terrorize them. But it's not like she's OP. If they adapt and maybe take to the skies with Afara and dive tanks, she'll struggle, and it's that fundamental rock paper scissors dynamic that really shines through in this meta, more so than ever before. Another aspect I really like is that skill heroes, despite some of them being more niche than before, really have room to excel. Widow, Hanzo, McCree, Genji, Ana and Zen are all good, to name just a few, and that's not always been true in metas past. Sombra and Doom are both good too. When was the last time you could say that? Because no one hero or playstyle really dominates, I feel we're closer to the original vision of how Overwatch should play than we've ever been, and that makes me really happy. Being able to play Ana a lot more certainly helps how I view this meta for sure, and we all know my happiness is what really matters, Kappa. Right, now we get to the bad meta, the one I'd like to forget or erase from my memory like an ex-girlfriend, like in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I'm really sorry, Mercy mains, but the Mercy meta has to go to Room 101. I know, a lot of people liked it, but I really didn't, and here's why. I think we should all be able to agree that must picks are bad for the game. Whether that be must pick heroes or comps, it's not great. The game gets to be a grind because every match is essentially the same. Well, Mercy's insane rework made her the very definition of that term, and not for a short space of time. The rework itself is controversial, even among Mercy players, but the initial strength of Valk was absurd. A res reset and shortened cooldowns, which meant at its height you could res, pop ult, res again, and then a third time before the ultimate was over, while also flying around at ridiculous speed, healing or damage boosting your team. It utterly defined the meta for months and months and months, and despite iterative nerfs where the res reset was taken away, the instant res was removed, her Valk movement was slowed down, as was her Guardian Angel speed, mid-fight res was still so important to the game, she remained a must-pick in many situations at the pro level. Now, I personally believe it was a bad idea to have so much impact value in a hero that is on the easier side to play as well. Now before you angrily sacrifice me in a giant wicker mercy effigy to the support gods, hear me out. I'm not saying she took no skill. The movement and staying alive certainly did, but she should never have been the most important hero in the game for 6 months if not more. Now you might say, well Eddie, you just didn't like it because you're a trash tier mercy. This is true, my mercy is hot garbage, but one of my best heroes, Zen, was also pretty meta at the time and I got to play him pretty much every match. But that's the problem, it was literally every match. Now some other skill heroes also saw benefits from mercy being way too good. Widow, Hanzo, McCree, they all prospered at the end of her pocket and mid-fight res, but the game suffered, and that's why it's here on my delete from memory list. Now I did say at the beginning, your picks for these slots will be different to mine, and that's okay. I know some people would very easily take mercy meta over dive, for example, but these metas are the ones that gave me the best and most enduring memories in Overwatch. Put down in the comments section below what metas you most enjoyed so we can all compare. If Beyblade isn't in at least one person's favourite list, I'll be very, very disappointed. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please don't forget to leave a rating. If you never want to miss another video of ours again, please click the bell icon next to the subscribe button on our channel to join the notification squad. You'll be in great company. And finally, please follow the Your Overwatch Twitter. It's where you can find updates about new videos and other cool stuff. I've been Eddie the Chump, and until next time,